Alright, we are going to do scenario number 11, which is the planet killer, or planet crusher. So let's just quickly take a look at what rules that we've learned up until scenario 11. And as you can see, it's pretty much everything. But the only thing left after scenario 11 is the specific rules for specific races and their specific weapons. So at this point we're using pretty much all of the cadet rules. In fact, we're actually adding in a few rules which aren't really cadet. For instance, we are using shield reinforcement. And let's just take a look at the rules list window. And we'll just quickly configure what it is we are using. Now you might want to listen or play back this YouTube video at a faster speed, 1.2, 1.25. Now, if you ever use this rules checklist against an opponent, just make sure that after one side fills it out, that the other side synchronizes to that particular side that filled it out. And be careful, do not click on the plus or minus symbol, otherwise it will possibly default everything back to being fully checkmarked. Now, while we are not using mid-turn speed changes, because it's not a cadet rule, the planet crusher itself, or the planet killer, does have the ability to change speed under specific circumstances. It can go to speed 0, or it can start speeding back up again. Okay, so that's all the rules that we are and we are not using. This is the rule book, rules by rule number, and I'm going to show you J section. We're looking for J212, I believe it is. Here it is, J2212. So in the monster scenario number 11, admin channels can be used to gain information against the monster or about the monster. Each administrator's shuttle on the map counts as one lab box, but at the range of the shuttlecraft, not the range of the ship. so in scenario 11 we basically have learned the additional rules for how to use the laboratory to gain scientific research points. So we will be using this chart. And it's done by the closest approach. And then you roll a die at that particular range, and that's how many points you get. So the ship gets a roll, and each shuttlecraft gets its roll. Now the cadet ship has only one lab. As opposed to the full-scale CA. Which is 8. So it takes a cadet ship a lot longer, 8 times longer, to gain information than it would for a typical heavy cruiser. So because of that, the damage that the monster does is going to be reduced. Now I've rewritten this scenario from what the booklet says. It says it's reduced for cadet ships as opposed to saying 50%, because the first couple times I played this scenario, 50% was too much. So what I've done is I've reduced it for 50% for the first 4 die rolls, but for a roll of a 5 and a 6, I've kept the damage as it is. So basically, the 1 would have been reduced to 0.5, and that would have been rounded up. The 5 would have been reduced to 2.5, so I'm keeping it at, that would have been 3, I'm keeping it at 5. It's not that big of a change. Now, in this scenario, we are going to continue using the cadet ship and the 16 impulse chart. And for the setup, the planet and the ship are not in the proper spot. So the planet needs to be 2514. Which would be here. And the ship should be in 2503. And then everything comes down to how does the monster operate. Well, we don't know how to kill the monster or how to win the scenario, so we have to gain research points before the planet killer or the monster can inflict 200 points of damage to the planet. And once we gain the 100 points of research, we can roll a die and find out how to kill or win the scenario. I've rewritten a couple of these. So the planet killer can be destroyed by a suicide shuttle. I've added launched at range 0. If you try and launch a suicide shuttle at the monster at any other range, the monster defense system will more than likely kill your suicide shuttle, so it's really more of a no-brainer that you have to launch it at range 0. But I've now changed the rule that it actually has to be launched at range 0. And this one used to be by tractor beam, but cadet ships don't have a tractor beam, so I just changed it to firing a phaser at a crack you just found and rolling a 1 or a 2. Doesn't matter if it's a phaser 1, phaser 2, or phaser 3, you just have to roll a 1 or a 2. And the planet killer can be destroyed by 200 points of damage. Only 150 points of damage scored prior to rolling this result is counted. So once you score 150 points of damage and you still haven't gotten your research points yet, at that point there's no point to continuing to damage the monster because you're going to be reset to 150. And the monster can be destroyed or struck by a probe, fired as a weapon. And the monster can be destroyed by a boarding party transported aboard the ship after doing 10 additional damage to it. Sort of like knocking down a bit of a shield or knocking off a little bit of armor to allow you to transport over. Before, this was just beam a boarding party aboard. That was still a little bit too easy, so I just increased the difficulty a little bit. Now, in addition to that, I've added in some optional rules. So the monster moves by automatic rules. Its mission is to destroy the planet. It will always move towards the planet unless distracted by a ship. In cases where the monster may move into either two hexes, both of which are toward the planet, just roll a die. An optional rule. If the distracting starship moves to 4 or greater hexes away, the monster returns to going after the planet, and it adds 2 to its speed for the next turn. It was a little bit too easy to distract the monster, and at that point on it never goes after the planet again. So here it's got a way of returning to trying to attack the planet, which is, after all, its primary mission. If the monster enters the same hex as a ship, it will stay in that hex until the ship is destroyed or leaves. This is actually an errata rule that is on the starfleetgames.com website, which they added after the first publishing of the cadet module, so I've added it here into the scenario for the Vassal module. Allow the monster to hold fire until a later impulse, I misspelled impulse, I'll have to fix that, to try to hit a weaker shield if the speeds and facings of the ship make it clear the monster will get closer before the end of the turn. So before, the monster would just simply fire right away on impulse 1 if the ship was within 6, and that was a little bit too predictable. So here we're going to allow the monster to hold fire if it's going to get closer. Now if it's going to maintain the same distance or get farther away, it will immediately fire. The monster has a speed of 6 per turn, and we've created an optional rule here where you roll a d6, and you can either decrease the speed by 1 or 2 or increase the speed by 1 or 2, and that will continue to accumulate turn after turn. And if the monster reaches top speed, that is speed 16 on an impulse 16 impulse chart, or speed 31 on a 32 impulse chart, then the next 2 turns, each turn it reduces speed by the roll of a d6. If at the beginning of any impulse, before movement, a starship is within 2 hexes of the monster will begin to follow the starship as a seeking weapon. So they really should have rewritten this so that 3, as that comes before 1. But anyway, it's all there. If 2 or more starships are within this detection range, the monster will follow the closer one. Well, in this scenario, we're only going to have 1 ship. If 2 are the same range, just like with a die roll, it will not follow a ship if blocked from view by the planet, which means it won't fire at a ship blocked by the planet. On the first impulse that the monster detects is within 6 hexes of a starship, it will fire its weapon. This operates as a phaser, but uses the special chart below, and we've already shown you the reduction. And because the cadet ships only have the 1 lab, the timing is much longer, so that's why if it's firing at the planet it gets reduced in damage as well. As you see by the chart, range has no effect, but the weapon is limited to 6 hexes. If the monster is within range of the planet, it will fire at the planet. The monster can fire its weapon only once per turn, and there's some exceptions to that. The monster will always fire its weapon at a starship it is not fired at during that turn when the monster begins to follow that starship. That is, it reaches range 2. The monster will also fire its weapon in addition to any other fire on that turn and any plasma torpedo that moves within 2 hexes. And the weapon is 360 degrees. There is no cooling period between turns. You can fire on the last impulse and again on the first impulse of the next turn. The monster has a turn mode of 0, so it can turn every time it moves. Monster is equipped with a close-in defense system, so whenever a drone enters it, it's a 50% chance of destroying the drone. We're not using drones in this scenario. And the monster will also use this system on any shuttle within 3 hexes. And it's a 50% chance of destroying the shuttle, roll of 4 to 6. But will not fire at a given shuttle more than once per turn. So this 50% chance of killing a suicide shuttle is why you don't try and launch the suicide shuttle at anything else other than 0. If the monster moves adjacent to the planet, it will cease movement, unless it moves to follow a starship. If the monster moves into the same hex as a non-moving ship, it will also stop moving until the ship is destroyed or the ship moves out of the hex. If the ship moves out of the hex on the next impulse, the monster will start moving at speed 6. And here's an optional rule. If the monster is in the same hex as a stationary ship for the entire turn, it will fire a second time at that ship, in addition to any other fire on the last impulse, and will subtract 1 from the die roll. So a 6 becomes a 5 for that second shot. So if for the entire turn it's in the same hex, that means the monster will have fired on the first impulse and on the last impulse. Because it's a mistake in the setup for this scenario that it was too easy for a starship to simply get to range 0, stop moving, and reinforce its shields. So let's start the scenario. The ship has a phaser capacity of 4. It's got 3 phaser 1s and 2 phaser 3s. The photons are on the first turn of arming. I'll put in a probe here for the probes. Now, the first probe will be ready to fire on the second turn. And the rules say that you can only have 1 probe armed. And you can only fire or launch 1 probe per turn, but that doesn't mean that you can't start arming a second probe. It just means that if by the end of turn 2 you haven't launched the armed probe, then on turn 3 you're going to lose the arming of the second probe. So you've only still got the 1 probe armed. Okay, so what do we have for power here? 15 left. Yeah, well, the first turn, the monster's going to go 6. So it's going to end up here. Which means we'll end up at range 3 from the monster. Well, we don't need to be 3. But 3 is good. The closer you get to the monster, the more research points you get. So let's put in the 15. so the first turn, the monster is going to be going 6, and we are going to be going 15. Now there's no real reason for us to go one impulse at a time, since it's just a one opponent single play game. So we'll just jump sections of 4. Okay, so by the 4th impulse, Fed moves 3, and the monster moves 1. The next set, monster will move 2, Fed will move 4. Okay, the next set, monster will move 1, we will move 4. So we're range 9. Okay, at this point, I'm going to launch some shuttles. And I'm also going to grab a weapons tracking sheet. Okay, next impulse, the Federation ship moves. Next impulse, monster shuttle, and Federation ship moves. And I launch another shuttle. Okay, next impulse, Federation ship moves. Actually, before we move that, we should go back because we were at range 6. So right here, the monster would fire. But we now have that optional rule that if it's clear from the speeds that it's going to get closer, it'll hold fire. So we're pointing directly towards one another, so it's obviously we're going to get closer. So we'll hold. So we'll do next impulse. And on the last impulse, everything moves. And we got to range 2 instead of range 3. I might have moved the monster twice there. Either that or I miscounted. Well, let's see. The monster should have moved 6 from 101. Yep, I moved the monster twice. Okay. Just cleaning off the impulse chart. Okay, so on the last impulse, there's going to be firing. The monster will fire, and the Federation ship will fire. So let me just clean off the sheet here. Okay, this is turn 1. Impulse 16. So Fed, F for Fed, and P for Planet Killer. Each other. We don't need to record the hex, but the weapons are going to be, for the Fed, 3 phaser 1s, because that's all that's armed. Now, because I have not taken any internals yet, I can click on the weapons to indicate them as being fired, but once I actually lose a shield, I can no longer do that, because it gets too confusing. But for now, since all my shields are up, that's what I'll do to indicate that they've been fired. Okay, so the monster fires. And let's see, where did I put that window? There it is. Monster fires 3, and a 3 is 10 points of damage. I have no shield reinforcement, but I do have 2 battery, which I will drain now. So 2 battery drain during the turn. And apply 8 to the shield. And the return fire is 1, 4, and 1. So it is range 3. A 1 and a 4 is 10, and a 4 is 14. So that's 14 damage to the Planet Killer. But we have gotten range 3 for research. So let's roll for research. Range 3, roll of a 2 is 6 research points. And then we have 4, 5, and 6 for the 2 shuttles, so let's roll those. So only 1 to 4s do anything. We rolled a 3, and that's 2 more points. So that's 8 points for research. So we did 14 to the monster. The monster did 8 to us, and we got 8 research. Okay, so energy allocate for turn 2. Okay, so we still have 20 power. Battery available 0. So let's charge our battery. The photons are ready for their second turn. The probe is ready, and we'll start arming another probe. We fired 3 phasers, which means there's 1 in the capacitor. facing the monster, a damage shield of 8. But we're facing each other, so the monster can hold its fire or try and get closer to get a down shield, but since it's firing on that down shield and the range doesn't matter, it's in the monster's best interest just to fire right away, so there won't be any holding there. Previously it held because there was a possibility that it may have gotten a weaker shield. Okay, so we have used 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 power. We have 12 left. And if we look at the damage that the monster can do, it can do 20 to an 8 shield. So ideally we should put all 12 into reinforcement. But we don't want to be sitting, not moving next turn, otherwise the monster will get an extra shot at us. But for now, we don't need to go anywhere. So that's what we'll do. So we'll put the 12 reinforcement up. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So confirmed, we've used 20. Okay, so we are now going speed 0. And the monster gets to roll for what it's going to do for movement. Okay, so it increases its speed by 1 because this is the way it works. A 1 is a reduction of 2. A 2 is a reduction of 1. 3 and 4 have no change in speed. 5 increases by 1 and 6 increases by 2. So we rolled a 5, it's going to increase by 1 for speed 7. Okay, so there's no 15 on the board. There are still shuttles going speed 6, the monster's going 7, and we are going 0. Okay, so first impulse, we're going to have some fire. So both units are firing again at each other. We'll just put quotations here. The Fed is going to fire the 2 photons. And the monster is going to fire its weapon because it's shooting the weakest shield. And its weapon doesn't increase with damage with range. So here's the monster. That's a 3. And that is 10 damage. We have 12 reinforcement, so there's 2 left on reinforcement. So 12 minus 10. And the 2 photons. And the roll here at 3 is 1 to 4 for 8. So 1 hit for 8. Okay, so Next impulse, nothing moves. Impulse after that, the shuttles, and the monster. Now, what are we going to do with the shuttles? Well, if we take a look at that monster defense, it's within 3 hexes. So we want to stay at least range 4. We're at range 5, and the monster's closing. And we need to turn around. Okay, so let's go forward, and we'll turn. So both shuttles are now facing the exact same direction. Okay, so 4th impulse, nothing happens. 5th impulse, the monster moves. The monster is within 2 of the ship. So it's fired at the ship this turn. It's now chasing the ship. So it will go to the same hex as the ship. Because if we look at the rule, if the monster enters the same hex as a ship, it will stay in that hex until the ship is destroyed or leaves. Okay, next impulse. The shuttles move. Next impulse, the monster moves, and the monster is now in the same hex as the ship, so it will go to speed 0. Now, because it's not in the same hex as the speed 0 ship for the entire turn, because it just got there now, it's not going to fire a second time. Okay, so right now the only thing that's going to move are the shuttles. And the shuttles are going to go 4. But we don't want to get any closer, so it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're at the end of the turn. So let me just undo the chart. Okay, so the Fed has power in 2 phaser 3s that it could fire at the point where the monster entered, which is about impulse 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that power and we're going to pump it into the phaser 1s up front, and we recharged our batteries. So we are going to drain our batteries during the turn and put those batteries into recharging phasers. I'm going to put this down as BAT DT during turn. So we have 3 points of power in our phasers. So we're going to fire 3 phasers on impulse 8. So 2, 3, and 5 at range 0. 2 and a 3 is 15, and a 5 is 20. So 20 and 22 is 42. Okay, so that's all the firing that occurred that turn. research. Well, the 2 shuttles are at range 4, so let's roll those. So 6 and 4 at range 4 is 4. And then we have the ship at 0. Rolls a 5 for 6 more, so that's 10. So we now have 18 research. And on this turn we have a probe able to be launched. So the probe will give us 20. So we're at 38. 1 probe used. Okay. That would be the end of the turn after the shuttles move all of that. We kind of did the firing and the moving of shuttles, a little bit out of order, but easy enough to keep it straight. Okay, so this time we're going to allocate again. We have 0 battery available, and we fired 3 phasers. We now have 0 in the phaser capacitors. So we're going to recharge our batteries. The photons have fired, but we're sitting at speed or range 0. That's going to also hit our already down shield. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do the 12 reinforcement. Because we're probably going to get hit like that again. And we complete arming the second probe, and we're going to start arming another probe. So there's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We have 4 left. And we want to not be in the same hex as the monster. We know the monster is going to start moving at speed 6. So let's put in speed 4. Okay. So let's undo the firing on the phasers. And we'll undo the photons. So this turn we have speed 6 shuttles, speed 4 fed, and the monster is starting at 0. Okay, so very first impulse, the monster's going to fire. And we, of course, can fire phasers again. But did we arm phasers? 0 there, and 0 here. So no, we don't have any phasers to fire. We do have 2 battery, but we're going to hold on to them. Okay, so the planet killer is firing. So this is 3 and 1, and it's the killer, or the planet killer. It does a 5, which is a really bad shot, and a 5 is 5. Doesn't even dent our reinforcement. We're getting really lucky. Okay, so second impulse, nothing. Third impulse, the shuttles move. I want to stay at range 4. Next impulse, the Federation ship moves. And at this point, the planet killer will change speed, and it's going to start moving at speed 6. So the Fed at this point is going to fire by draining 2 battery. And putting it in phasers. So 2 power, we could fire 2 phaser 1s, or we could fire 1 phaser 1 and 2 phaser 3s, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire 4 phaser 3s. I'm going to fire this phaser 1 as a phaser 3, phaser number 3 as a phaser 3, and the 2 phaser 3s as phaser 3s. That's 4 phaser 3s that are firing. Okay, so this is impulse 4, so 3, 4, Fed is firing, target is a planet killer, 4 phaser 3s. So at range 1, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are 4. 5 and 6 are 3. So we have 6, 4, and 4 for 14. So 42 plus 14. So for weapons fired, okay, so next impulse, nothing moves. Now these 2 shuttles do have a phaser 3 of their own, and this is as close as they ever want to get to the planet killer to avoid the monster fire. So let's fire those 2 phaser 3s. A 1 and a 3 at range 4. Only the 1 hits, so 1 point of damage. So is it really worth firing the shuttles? Well, why not? They're not doing anything else, are they? Other than collecting research. Okay, so at this point we now have the monster going speed 6. And what was the condition again for the monster to start tracking the planet instead of the ship? It is if the distracting starship moves to 4 or greater, the monster returns to going after the planet, adding 2 to its speed. Okay, so next impulse. 6's move. And the planet killer is going 6 again. So does it turn left or turn right? 1 to 3 it'll turn left. It turns left. Okay. So the next thing that moves will be on 8. The Federation ship moves. Now the turn mode for 4 is 1, and it went forward once, and now it's turning. And the planet killer. Okay, well, if the planet killer turns right, the range is 1, 2, 3, 4. If it turns left, the range is 3, so therefore it turns left. And the shuttles. They've already got their closest approach of 4. So they're just going to turn around and start going around this way. They don't want to get any closer, or they have no need to get any closer. Okay, so the next thing that moves will be on impulse 11, and that will be the monster, which again will turn left, and the shuttles, which will again turn left. Next, the Federation ship moves, and it's got a turn mode of 1, so it's going to turn down. Nothing moves. And then the Planet Killer and shuttles. Nothing, and then everything. So Planet Killer, ship, and shuttles. So do I want this to shoot my number 4 shield or one of my side shields? I'll give it one of my sides. Okay, the Planet Killer can go here, and it's range 1, 2, 3, or it can go here, 1, 2, 3. Now, in the rules, we said that the monster can hold this fire to try and get onto a down shield. So does it prefer to try and get to the number 1, or will it shoot the 4? Because both X's are valid. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, it goes straight. And the shuttles will move. Okay, so research points. Okay, well, the Fed ship was at range 0. It's within range 6, so it's going to fire a probe. And range 0 roll is 6, so 5, so that's 25, 20 for the probe. And the 2 shuttles were as close as range 4, so 2 points there, so 27. So that's 65, I do believe. And we are a good 35 points away from getting our first roll. Okay, so we're going into turn 4. Let's undo what weapons have fired. I'm absolutely amazed that we still have a number 1 shield left. If that monster had rolled a 1, that would have been 20 points each of those 2 times it fired, which would have been more than our reinforcement would have been able to handle. But we got lucky. Okay. So we put 2 in the phasers, we fired 2 points. There's no batteries available. We're going to recharge the batteries. We're moving again. Maybe start arming photons again. And we've fired a second probe. We only have 5 probes. So 5 minus 2 equals 3 is what we got so far left for probes. So we're going to arm a probe, and we had another probe arming, so we're going to do that. So that'll be 1 probe fired, 2 probe fired, this will be 3 probe fired, and next turn will be 4th probe fired. And we're going to hold 1 probe because we may need that to kill the monster. Okay, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8. Again, we are facing it with a number 3 shield, and number 3 is 10, so we can take 10 damage. So we got 2 batteries, so let's see if we can put 8 on that and see what we can get for speed, which means we will get 6 for speed if we don't arm our phasers. And the monster was doing 6. And depending on how we roll, the monster may slow down or may speed up. So let's go with that. So we aren't arming phasers, so is it better to arm our phasers or our photons? Let's take 2 off of one of the photons and throw 2 into to rearming phasers. So right now we have 0 on the phaser capacitor. So we are going speed 6. We forgot to change our speed to 4 for last turn. Oh well. Here's our 6. What speed is the monster coming in at? It's coming in at 6, so we're going to maintain distance. And we are at range 1, 2, 3, so the monster is still chasing us. Okay, so let's clear this off. So everything is speed 6. Okay, well, on first impulse, the monster is going the same speed as us, so there's no reason for it to hold its fire, and it has a valid target, so it will fire. So the Planet Killer fires at fed. And a 5. Planet Killer is rolling badly, so that's 5 damage. So 8 minus 5 doesn't even punch through our reinforcement. The Fed is getting very, very lucky on Planet Killer rolls. Okay, so let's just go to the impulses where things fire and move. So everything's going to move. There's no reason to try and keep the shield facings. Planet Killers are going to go forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. So shuttles are going to go there. Next impulse, nothing. Nothing. Everything moves. We're just going to keep doing the same thing. Nothing. Everything moves. Nothing. Everything moves. Okay, so we're going to move nothing, nothing, once, nothing, and then again. So everything's going to move twice. so the Planet Killer could go here or here. It's not really going to matter for what shield it's off of. And the Fed could fire weapons, but it's going to fire a probe. So on turn 4, we got another probe for another 20. It's going to take us to 85. The closest the ship got was 3. So 4 more. And the 2 shuttles, closest they got was 4. 1 and 2, 11. So the shuttles actually did more research than the ship did. So that's 15 more research. Did I do that on 4? Yeah, I did do that on 4. Okay. So 15 more research. It's going to take us to 90 and then 100. So we now have a research roll we can do. And that was the 3rd probe used. And what do we have to do to kill or win the scenario or kill the monster? Die roll, please. The last 2 times I played this, I rolled 6s the very first time. Let's see if we can avoid that this time. 5. It can be destroyed by a boarding party, transported aboard the impulse after doing 10 more damage. So we gotta close, hose, and transport. Okay, so energy allocation for turn 5. Zero battery available. Oh, no, wait, actually we didn't drain battery. So 2 in battery. 2B on the photon. No sense in starting to arm the other one. No sense in keeping up the probes. We have 2 in the capacitor because we fired no phasers. So let's put in 2 more for the phasers. So we're fully loaded on phasers. And we were going 6. Swap by 10 if we want, so we can go all the way up to 15. But there's no real reason to. We can just simply let the monster close with us. But we need to put power into the transporter. That's actually only 0.2 per transporter. So let's drain 1 battery and recharge 0.8. So we have 16 power left. Let's do speed 0 with some tacks. So 1 impulse tack and 1 warp tack. Or we can just write in here a line for tacks and put the 2 up here. And then a WI for warp and impulse. So we have 14 left. Now let's just throw it into general reinforcement. Okay, so you're coming in. Speed 0. Shuttles are still speed 6, and the monster will roll to see what it does for speed. Okay, it increases speed by 2. It's going to speed 8. Okay, so 8s are going to go on the 2nd impulse. The monster knows that it's going to get closer, so it's going to hold its fire. It is now range 2. So on the second impulse, I am going to tack to the right with a warp tack. Very next impulse, shuttles move, and the Fed will tack again. With the impulse tack, and he will fire his photon torpedo on this impulse, which should give us 8, and we will fire 2 phaser 1s as well. So this is 5-3. The Fed fires that planet killer. 1 photon. 2 phaser 1s. And at this point, the monster could return fire, but it's still closing, so it's going to try and maneuver for that number 1 shield now that we've actually pointed it towards it. So here is the photon. It's a 1 to 5. And misses. Here are the 2 phaser 1s. We want to try and get 10 damage. And 2 6s. Range 2. So we've done 6 damage. We didn't even get our 10. Okay, so that means that's 63 damage to the monster. And we have fired that, and we have fired that. We do have a phaser 1 and 2 phaser 3s left. And we have the 2 shuttles. So easy to have done 10 points of damage, and we didn't even manage it. Okay. So the next thing that moves is a planet killer, and the planet killer is going to side slip because they can get our number 1. And I've done a warp and an impulse tack. So even if I had paid for another tack, I couldn't do it yet because it's not in the second segment of 8. And you can only do 1 warp tack in each segment of 4. So the planet killer is going to shoot my number 1. And that's what it's going to do right now. And it rolled a 6. Okay. That is pathetic rolls for the monster. Let's roll that again for the monster. That's too many 6s in a row. A 5. Let's roll the monster again. A 5. Let's roll the monster again. A 2. There we go. Worst rolling monster ever. Seriously. 2. That'll do 15. Okay, and we put how much into the general? 14. So 7 off 14 is 8. So it's 8 to the number 1. And we have 1 battery we can drain, so that's 7 to the number 1. Still got an up shield. Okay, so next thing that moves is the shuttle and the monster. The monster goes the same hex as us, and then changes speed to 0. And the shuttles move. So we have 5 more to go before we get there. So shuttles are going to move on the 8th. And they're going to move again on the 11th. And here we have 2 rolls to see if they die by the in-close monster defense. And we need to get to 10 for damage. And we've only done, what was it, 6 this turn? Yeah, 6. So we got to do 4 damage. Can we do 4 damage with 2 phaser 3s at range 3? Theoretically we can. And if we don't, because the monster's off our number 1, we've got 1 phaser 1 left. So we're going to fire the 2 phaser 3s from the shuttles, and 1 phaser 1 off the number 1 at the monster. So this is impulse 11. This is turn 5 or 6. Turn 5. So the fed and the shuts. 1 phaser 1, 2 phaser 3s. Okay, so the 2 phaser 3s at range 3. That would be the 5 and the 2. I didn't mean to roll 3 dice, and I'll count the 5 as the phaser. So range 0 of 5 is 5, and then a 2 at range 3 is 6, 7. 7 and 6 is more than 10. So we've got our 10 points of damage on the monster accumulated. So the very next impulse, we drop our shields, we activate our transporter, we defeat the monster. Now if we really wanted to be picky with the way that was worded for the rule, because it does say the impulse after doing 10 damage to it, we could say that I didn't do 10 in one impulse, so I therefore have to keep going. So let's say that. It's not really what I meant when I wrote that, but it could be interpreted that way. Since we did 7. Okay, so let's just do that. Okay, so let's undo the firing. We have 1 point left in our phaser capacitor from the phaser 3s in the rear. So there's 1. So if we didn't do the 10, we wouldn't have transported aboard, so we still have our 20. We have 0.8 available. So we are going to drain 0.2 for the transporter. And we're going to recharge 1. I could recharge it by 1.4, but I don't want to play with that. We're not going to bother with the photons, because we can't fire them at range 0. Our number 1's going to get hit with a big whammy, or could possibly get hit with a big whammy, but we want to do at least 2 tacks. So warp and an impulse. Now, the monster didn't start the turn and end the turn in the same hex as us last turn, but it will this turn because we're not moving anywhere. So 2 warp impulse. So let's count up what we've done. So we've done 1 and 3 is 4, 5, 6. We have 14. We're going to put 14 on a number 1. We're going to move 0. And we'll go with that. So in the very first impulse, we didn't roll for the shuttles. Here's the 2 shots at the shuttles to see if the MSIDs killed the shuttles. And it's 4 to 6 for a kill. So 1 shuttle is dead. And then the shuttle would have moved 2 more. Okay, so on this turn, on this impulse, brand new turn, the Federation, so 6, 1, so firing at the planet killer, and the planet killer is firing back, so everybody's firing at everybody. We're firing 3 phaser 1s at range 0, and a shot, so phaser 3 at range 1. So full bolt into the monster, and the monster's firing back. So here's the monster fire. A 4. 5 damage. This monster is kind of cross-eyed, I guess. Anyway, we've got that reinforced. Here's our 3 phaser 1s at range 0. So 1 is 8. A 1 is 9, a 2 is 8, and a 4 is 6 at range 0. And then we fired a phaser 3, and the phaser 3 at range 1 does 4 damage. And then the MSIDs, one of them, at the shuttle. Shuttle survives. So we did our 10 points of damage to the monster. We drop our shield, we beam aboard, we deactivate the monster. And since the monster is no longer activated, it doesn't get to fire at us again on the last impulse. There we go, we have defeated the monster in this scenario. And the monster really shoots rather badly. So what I think I'm going to do before I re-upload this changed scenario is I'm going to change the amount of damage that the monster does, because it trails off far too quickly, I believe. So the 40, 30, 20, and the 10 is kind of okay, but the 5 and the 1 not so much. So I'm going to tweak that a little bit, because as you can see here, even a cadet ship can throw up enough reinforcement that is going to overcome what it can do. So we're going to increase the firing power of the monster a little bit. But there you go, a quick little video on Scenario 11, defeating the Planet Crusher monster. Have fun and give it a go yourself.